Many of the Chargers' new coaches and front office members have talked about Quentin Johnston potentially making a leap in year two, but I'm just not sure if I'm ready to buy in.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, when you're a wide receiver and you get picked in the first round, expectations are very, very high for you to produce right away. And unfortunately for Quentin Johnston, we didn't see the type of production that we wanted for that position. So can he break out in his second season, in his sophomore year? Can he show the potential that we saw at TCU? And will the Chargers have a better roster in 2023? And how many picks are they actually going to end up with in the 2024 draft?
That's a big question because we know Joe Ortiz comes from a place where they love trading back and love acquiring picks. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, today we're getting into our Chargers buy or sell. Thank you to everyone who hit us up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter or X, giving us your buy or sells, and we see that you guys love that. You guys came out in full force. And one of the first ones I want to get to today is from Beyond Eons, who asks, buy or sell, Quentin Johnston doubles his stats from last year at 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. So a little less than doubling at least the yardage, right? He had 431 yards, 2 touchdowns last season, 38 catches. It's a good question, David, and I know we just talked about Marcus Brady saying, hey, sometimes the player can make their leap in year two. For me, though, there's multitude of reasons where I guess I'm selling this because I think I have too many questions, and I think I need to see a little bit before I'm ready to kind of buy in on the Quentin Johnston in year two hype.
Yeah, I mean, Quentin Johnston has some obvious things, obvious deficiencies that he has to clean up in his second year. And the first, and the chief among them is just holding on to the football, is catching the ball, being reliable in that respect. Also getting open, creating more separation more consistently, I think is important. And then for me, I don't know what he's going to look like in the Greg Roman offense. I just don't know what his role is going to be. And, we know one thing, the Chargers are going to want to run the football, and they're really going to want to lean on that and establish that. Obviously, they're not going to completely alienate the passing game, but for a wide receiver that had some issues catching the ball and creating separation, I just don't know what his role is going to be in a completely new offense.
So you're selling it?
I am selling it, yes.
Yeah, I think the Greg Roman part of it's fair, and the catching the ball part of it is going to be huge, obviously. But if it was just that, I think I could buy into it more. To me, it's just more than that, right? It is the separation. It's getting off the line of scrimmage. It's playing more physical. And if you're going to have a new regime that comes in preaching physicality and all of these things, maybe they can help with that part of it. But there are just the nuances in his game that I just don't know how long it's going to take him to get there. Obviously, the Chargers have a player like Mike Williams, who had a really, really bad rookie season and came back and ended up playing very, very well and just getting paid again after he already got a pretty big second contract. So I just need to see more from Quentin Johnston. I think I wish I saw more of like the yards after the catch per reception, a better number there. Last year averaged 4 yards per catch after a reception, 42nd out of 79 wide receivers, where that was one thing we knew he was good at. And how they used him definitely was part of that, though. But if you're talking about just his production when he was on the field, he ranked 75 out of 80 wide receivers with 50 targets last year in yards per route run. When you run a route, how many yards are you getting out of that? He's at the bottom of the league. So I think part of that is the drop. I think that part of that is just him needing to mature and get better. And the Chargers brought in Sanjay Law, and maybe he'll be able to work some things with him. But this is the other part of it. If the Chargers take Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., that makes Quentin Johnston wide receiver 3. Right off the bat. What is a wide receiver 3 going to produce in Greg Roman's offense? That's a very, very fair question.
It is.
So I just don't know if I see him putting up 800 yards in the 4 touchdowns part. Hey, 4 touchdowns. Maybe that's attainable. I don't think that's out of the question.
Yeah.
800 yards or 862 yards if we're going to say he's doubling things. That's a low-end wide receiver 2 type of production, and I just don't know if I see it. Like I said, I went to training camp. I've seen him in person. He moves different. I think that he's an athlete that's ready to be at the NFL level. I just think there's the finer nuances in his game that are going to have to come a long way with Sanjay Law and those guys. So let's get into the next one here from him, Charger Baugh, who asked this: buy or sell? The Chargers prefer to trade back from pick number 5 and accumulate picks more than they prefer taking a wide receiver at pick number 5. You buying or selling that?
Yeah, I think that the Chargers understand that they have a ton of holes, but I feel like you have to go into the draft prepared and ready for everything. I feel like, do they feel like they're one wide receiver away from contention? No, I don't. So I feel like in that particular space, I feel like they probably would prefer to trade back and try to hit as many different position groups with as many premium picks as they possibly can. I mean, the one thing that we know about the draft is it's very unpredictable, Dan. There's no way to know what's going to happen. So they have to have a plan of attack for every possible scenario, whether that's 4 quarterbacks going before they go and they get to pick the number 1 non-quarterback on the board, or whether that's them getting an offer to entertain trading back. They have to have a contingency plan for every possible scenario.
Yeah, I'm buying it. I think that with Joe Ortiz, who obviously wasn't making the big calls when he was in Baltimore, but he was a huge part of the decision-making process, and his mentors with the Ravens are guys who like to try to trade down a bunch. They've done it a bunch of times in recent history, right? Almost every year they're trading back, except for last year, pretty much. But I think from what you're hearing from the coaches, like just even being up there yesterday, right, and just hearing the coaches in person talk about the offensive line and the balance and all of those things, where it's like, I think that even if you're just taking receivers off the table, they could take an offensive lineman at 5 for all we know. So I think they would rather trade back. I think they're hoping someone gives them that Godfather offer that they can't refuse. But if someone like the Arizona Cardinals ends up trading back with the Vikings and 4 quarterbacks really do go off the board, it's going to be hard to imagine there's going to be a trade package there I'm going to be willing to take instead of taking one of those 2 guys. But then they could turn around and take Joe Alt, right? That's just the feeling that I have. So it's hard for me to sell that they're just going to be set in stone. Hey, we'd rather take a wide receiver here than trade back. I think trading back is what they want. I think they want to get a haul. I think they know how many holes are on this roster.
Yeah.
Will they get that deal? I hope not, kind of.
Yeah, selfishly, right? Yeah.
Let's get to this next buy or sell here from Dylan Tyler, who says, buy or sell, no wide receivers or Brock Bowers on day 1 or 2 of the NFL draft. For me, hard sell.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's an absolute hard sell because we're talking about the first 3 rounds. You're telling me that they're looking at their wide receiver depth chart right now, not having any bona fide number 1 wide receiver. I mean, I think you can argue Josh Palmer is probably in that wide receiver 2 area, but they don't have a bona fide number 1. So you're gonna sit here and tell me that they look at that, they see what's in their room, they know they're very light, and they're not going to take a receiver in the first 3 rounds? No, I'm sorry. I'm not buying that at all. I think they're absolutely going to come out of the first 3 rounds of the draft with at least 1 wide receiver.
I have to hope so. We talked about Marcus Brady saying hey, it's a small room right now.
It is.
That's saying something. And you talk about Josh Palmer, and I'm bullish on Josh Palmer.
Yeah.
I like Josh Palmer's game. But if your number 1 receiver at his highest production level is more like a number 2 receiver, and your number 2 receiver has durability issues, and there's a gap between him and everybody else, it goes back kind of the Quentin Johnston thing. Like Quentin Johnston, he could have a breakout year, right? Absolutely. I just don't think the Chargers can go into the draft or any part of this offseason process banking on that happening.
Yeah.
You almost have to bank on the fact that it's not going to happen. You'll have to kind of bank on the fact that Josh Palmer isn't going to be able to stay healthy, right? That's what contingency plans are all about. That's what building depth is all about.
Yeah.
But in this room, it's less about depth and just adding talent to that room. You need both, but you really just need an influx of talent after you send away Keenan Allen the way they did, after you release Mike Williams. That room needs talent. This is a good wide receiver draft. You want to get somebody. If you're not going to take him at 5, please God, you have to be taking them in rounds 1 through 3 because the need is just that gigantic there. And there are going to be players there that are going to be worth taking. It's not like you're going to have a major reach because of the guys that are going to be available because of the depth of the wide receivers in this class. So I think they have to. I'd be shocked if they didn't. Brock Bowers does kind of feel out of the question. But besides that, receiver, you have to do it on day 1 or 2. It's a must. We have more to get into, though, including if this Chargers team could be more talented than the team they had in 2023 after losing guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Corey Linsley. A lot that has to happen between now and the start of the regular season for that to happen, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about FanDuel because it is playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball is in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. My favorite kind of bets are the bets that I can't lose. I mean, I hear that and I say, I wish I hadn't already signed up for it because that is a really, really good offer. And there's so many different sports for you to be betting on right now. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe and secure and easy to use. Because if you're putting money somewhere, you want to know you can trust it, and you can trust FanDuel. Another great thing is this weekend is the Masters, and if you're feeling crazy and you want to go Tiger Woods and thinks he's going to have a renaissance and win the whole thing, you can get him at plus 15,000. Probably go with someone like Scotty Scheffler or John Rahm, someone like that. But you have all those options, and the best golf weekend is coming up too. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. David, let's continue this buy or sell here, getting into the biggest Chargers storylines and overreactions. And thank you to everyone who hit us up at Locked On LAC to get your buy or sells in here. And we'll also do a Fan Mail Friday later on the week where you can hit us up with some more standard questions as well. But we have a really tough question here, because I think it's a how you kind of look at it type of a question from Nick German, who's saying, buy or sell, by the start of the 2024 season, through the draft, free agency, and player development, the Chargers will have a better roster overall than last season. Every day are from the UK, bolt up. We appreciate you, Nick. You buying or selling that?
Yeah, this is a really, really tough one, but I am going to buy it. And the reason why I'm going to buy it is, number one, they have a much, much better head coach. They have a legitimate, head coach in this league.
But it's about roster.
No,
right?
I know.
Is the roster better?
No, I know, but he's going to be a part of why the roster is going to be better because of the staff that he brought in. I feel like the development is going to be a lot more effective, a lot more streamlined. I also feel like they are going to be healthier with Ben Herbert in the building, them being able to strengthen up the neck and be able to, take care of some of those soft tissue injuries. I do feel like that is going to play an actual factor. But as far as the roster itself, I feel like they're already building better quality depth. I think they're making some smart decisions there. I feel like that's going to continue through the draft and through the second wave of free agency after the draft. I just feel like at the point in time when they kick it off for the 2024 season, that they're going to have a better, deeper roster than they had last season.
I mean, I think you could say deeper and feel good about that. I think the hard thing is, though, is you're going to have much less top-end talent, and I don't think there's any way around it. I mean, who is replacing Keenan Allen's production? Who do you have that can get anywhere close to that on this roster right now? Mike Williams' production, even. You don't even have anyone like that. Corey Linsley's production. You're losing Pro Bowlers. Corey Linsley, Austin Ekeler, Keenan Allen. You're losing other solid, above-average players like Mike Williams, like Gerald Everett. So from that aspect, you're just not going to have the big names and the big-time production in years past. This is the thing, though. You weren't getting it from those guys anyways, right? Yeah. And that's kind of where I would say, hey, I'm buying that it's a deeper roster. I think the overall talent at the top of the roster is not going to be as good as what we've seen in years past, but having all of your resources put into those players anyways hasn't helped you. So even though I don't think it's going to be as talented, which another thing is, hey, we're doing this in April. This is something we'll have a much better idea of after the draft and seeing, what they do there. Hey, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, that makes you feel a little bit different about the receiver room and the production there, So it's really tough. It's hard to say that. You're not going to have as many big name talents, but I do think this is going to be a much deeper team. And I do think that you could argue, hey, as a whole, with the new coaching staff, with the players and kind of the depth that they've tried to build in the offseason, I just think, hey, this is also a process. It's going to take some time as well.
Definitely.
They're trying to build it with one-year deals and a lot of bounce-back candidates, and things could go really wrong. But you trust this coaching staff to kind of get the most out of it. So I do think it'll be a more solid roster through and through than we saw last year, which was obviously pretty thin and pretty top heavy, as a lot of the things
as
that
it has been for a long time
under the Tom Telesco era. That's what we always talked about. Let's get to this one here from Big Daddy E, who's saying buy or sell. the Harbaugh culture will last past his tenure and define the new culture of the organization going forward, regardless of the next regime. Thanks, guys. Glad you are back together, guiding us into the draft. Thank you, Big Daddy. It's good to be back. We're finding our flow again. We've never missed this much time together as we have over the last couple of weeks. David, are you buying or selling that?
Yeah, the reason I am going to buy it, and the reason why I'm going to buy it is because I feel like the next head coach of the Chargers is going to come from the Jim Harbaugh coaching tree. I feel like Jim Harbaugh is going to retire. I don't feel like he's not going to get fired. I feel like he's going to have a lot of success here. I think this is going to be the last stop as a head coach in the college ranks or the NFL ranks. I feel like the next head coach is going to come from the Jim Harbaugh tree, and I feel like that is going to continue to permeate through the years well past Jim Harbaugh leaving as the head coach.
That's interesting. The NFL doesn't work like that, right? It may be when someone retires, but you don't get guys usually getting promoted from within to be a head coach. It just almost never happens that way. And I think the reason I would sell it on face value is just because we've kind of seen this happen already with Marty Schottenheimer, right? Marty Schottenheimer was a coach that was known for a lot of the same things that Jim Harbaugh was. One of the best coaches, if not the best coach, to never win a Super Bowl. They were tough. They ran the football. They had a lot of those things. And then they went with Norv Turner right after. All of that went away, right? There was no lasting carryover effect from Marty Schottenheimer to Norv Turner. So that's what makes me question a little bit. I didn't necessarily think of, hey, maybe he hands it off to someone in the organization like he did at Michigan. Much more common, I would say, in a college situation like that, but hard for me to imagine. But there are teams that have done it, right? If you think about the Ravens, if you think about the Steelers, those identities go further back than the coaches that they've had, and they've had those coaches for a very long time, right? Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh. Before it was Bill Cowher, who is kind of the same way, right? So those organizations have been able to do it, and that's what they're known for, and they've been able to carry over that legacy. So it's not as, far-fetched. Teams have done it. My thing is just, will Jim Harbaugh be around long enough to be able to kind of set something that's going to be kind of transcendent? Then you look at Jack Harbaugh, right, who's in his 80s or 90s and is still out here trying to be part of Michigan and getting out there and coaching position drills and stuff like that.
I love
it. So you just never know. Let's get to this one from Drotalk SD on Twitter, who asks, buy or sell, the Chargers will have 1,000-yard rusher in 2024. David, this is kind of a wild one. I don't know who would pick this one to be on here today. What would you say?
Yeah, I have no idea who that guy is. So I'm going to buy it. And the last time the Chargers had 1,000-yard rusher was 2017. And, of course, that was Melvin Gordon, where he rushed for 1,105 yards on the season. It's a long, long time since they've had a 1,000-yard rusher. I mean, that's, 6-7 years?
7 seasons, yeah.
7 seasons. That's unbelievable. But, hey, you got Jim Harbaugh in the building. You got Greg Roman, the run game whisperer, in the building. And you now have a guy in Gus Edwards that is understanding of that system, has flourished in that system, loves that system, and he is going to be featured. I truly feel like he is going to be a feature back. Yeah, they're going to have a couple other backs to give some carries to, but I feel like he's going to get the lion's share, and I feel like he's going to be the one that eclipses 1,000 rushing yards for the Chargers.
All of those things that you said are true, and he never even sniffed 1,000 yards in any of his seasons under Greg Roman in Baltimore, right? So that's why I'm going to sell it. I think that when Greg Roman had Gus Edwards and was using him, he might have had the most carries for running backs in the years that he was healthy. He did miss an entire season and missed more than half of another one.
Yeah.
But the most he ever had was 723 rushing yards. The thing that makes it a little tougher is they also had Lamar Jackson, right? Who rushed for over 1,000 yards in 2 of the seasons under Greg Roman. The only running back that had 1,000 yards under Greg Roman with Baltimore was Mark Ingram. I don't think Gus Edwards is Mark Ingram as far as just being that kind of every down back, or, the same caliber that Mark Ingram was there and the commitment they had there. And also things being opened up by Lamar Jackson. But also Justin Herbert's not going to sniff, 500 rushing yards, let alone 1,000. So yeah, I think that there are more rushing yards to potentially go around because of that, right? Because he's going to be running the ball less than Lamar Jackson, obviously. When he was in San Francisco, they did have 1,000-yard rushers, but it was Frank Gore, right? There's no Frank Gore on this team right now. I think the Chargers are going to draft a running back this year, and I think that it is going to be kind of a running back by committee approach like it was in Baltimore under Greg Roman. So I think the Chargers will have many more rushing yards this year. I do think it'll be more of a committee approach. It's not out of the realm of possibility by any means. I don't think it's crazy to say that, but I just don't necessarily see it this year. I think it's going to be split. And maybe Isaiah Spiller is not even in that conversation. We'll see kind of how the draft goes and how everything kind of goes from here. But we do have more buy or sells to get into. Let's do this one really quick. Buy or sell, one word. Buy or sell two or more of these players will start the season on the Chargers from Ollie, J.K. Dobbins, Malik Neighbors, Tyler Boyd, Blake Corum.
Sell.
I will sell it as well. I think one will.
I'm with you on that. I'm on one.
Two, I'm not as sure about. We do have more buy or sells to get into, though, including how many draft picks will the Chargers have? They currently have 9. When things are all said and done and the dust settles, how many will they get with a new general manager with Joe Ortiz, who we know likes to move around the draft? We're going to get into that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Dave, let's continue these buy or sells here, and we have one from Kirk in Eagle, Nebraska, who I think is the first buy or sell voicemail. I don't know if we've had that one before. We're going to get into that, but I do want to tell everyone to make sure they're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel, giving you every sport and access to it that only local experts that Locked On can provide. So make sure you guys go check that out and subscribe there. David, let's hear what Kirk from Eagle, Nebraska has for us, a buy or sell voicemail.
Hey, this is Kirk from Eagle, Nebraska. Hey, are you buying or selling? The Chargers will have more than 9 picks in this coming draft. Thanks. Have a good one.
David, they have 9 right now with the compensatory pick, with the 4th round pick they picked up from Keenan. Now, will they have more than that when things are all said and done?
I'm going to say yes. I am buying that they are going to have more than 9 picks. I do not, however, believe that it will be in the first round. I think they are going to they're going to trade back one of those mid-round picks. I think a third, maybe one of their 2/4 is a very big possibility for me, where they recoup an extra, let's say a 6th round pick there.
Sure, I feel like but that's interesting though, because you also said earlier you thought they were more likely to trade back than they were to take a wide receiver.
Yeah, that's because I feel like it's unlikely, however much Jim Harbaugh is campaigning for it to be, that 4 quarterbacks actually go before the Chargers are going to pick. I feel like that would be the scenario in which that doesn't happen. So, I don't feel like we're going to get that there. I feel like, they're going to, somebody else is going to trade up for, or actually, excuse me, I'm saying 4 quarterbacks are going to go. I feel like, they're saying it's very unlikely, but I feel like it will happen. And then the Chargers are going to be able to take their pick of the litter, whether that be Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors. I feel like that's what is going to happen here.
I'm going to buy it. I think that's still probably the most likely scenario in the first round is them trading back, even if 4 quarterbacks go straight. It feels to me, if they're looking at this roster and evaluating it the way that they are, I think they want to trade back. Like I said at the beginning of the show, right? I said I think that they want to trade back. I think they would rather trade back than stick at 5 and take a wide receiver.
But who's trading up if 4 quarterbacks go? I mean, I think there's
plenty of teams. There's plenty of teams. You're just not going to move as far back, but you're not going to get nearly as much. But you could go, to 9 with the Chicago Bears if they want to move up for a wide receiver. There's a ton of teams that could try to do that. I think they'll have more than 10. The thing about the Ravens is they move around. They trade back. They also trade up. So the Chargers could use some of the extra draft capital that they have this year to go secure players in the mid rounds by moving some of those picks around. I think they will end up with 10 if I had to put a number on it right now. I still think that right now it feels like the most likely outcome is them trading back at 5, which would put them at 10 picks if they got 11 and 23 this year from the Vikings, or potentially got future picks, but kept the picks they had this year. A lot of holes on this roster need to be filled, so I wouldn't be surprised if they have more than 9 when things are all said and done, especially because, like we talked about, Joe Ortiz comes from the Ozzie Newsome tree, comes from the Eric DeCosta tree, where they're moving around all the time. And even moved back multiple times in the first round before in his time with Baltimore, and have had up to like 5 trades in the same draft, moving back and moving up. So I think they're going to move around. It'll be interesting to see kind of where they decide to deploy it at. So let's get to this one from Darren Tassone, who is saying, buy or sell, the Chargers would take less of a deal on a trade with the Vikings than the Broncos or the Raiders to keep a premier quarterback out of the AFC West. Buy or sell?
Yeah, I'm going to buy that for sure. I mean, and I think you have to just look at the placement. Obviously, the Broncos are at 12, the Raiders are at 13, so just based off placement alone, that you're going to definitely want more from those teams. But also, like we've talked about before, if it's a guy in your own division, a team in your own division, then yeah, it's automatically going to be marked up. Like I'm going to need more right off the bat because I'm going to have to play you and play your team twice a season. So yes, it's going to be the in division tax. I mean, let alone the quarterback tax. It's going to be both of those. I'm trying to get carte blanche, baby. You're gonna have to load up this deal and really make it worth my while to make me want to trade with you instead of trading with the Vikings.
To me, in division rivals, it starts with 3 first-round picks, which might be what you asked for the Vikings anyways, right? You might ask for 11 and 23, and you might ask for their first in 2025. I would take potentially less than that from the Vikings. If they could put a different package together, could move picks around to get another second-round pick, could give you more in this upcoming draft to help you this year. With the Raiders and Broncos, I'm taking the 2025 first-round pick and the 2026 first-round pick and their 2024 first-round pick. It starts there. Yeah. That's where it starts for me. The other thing is, are you sure you're getting a premier quarterback? You're likely getting the 4th quarterback drafted in this draft. Yeah. I think that's anything but a sure thing. And like I've said before when we broached this topic, there's a good chance that 2025 pick is a top 10 pick. So even though 11 and 23 are nice because you get the instant gratification of knowing what you're getting this season, if you're telling me the Broncos, who are a mess, and the Raiders, who are a mess, are both going to be playing with a rookie quarterback in 2024, and you're telling me that's a team that's going to get, push for a playoff spot, I don't see that at all.
No chance.
I could be wrong. I don't see it. And they all could still do that this year. Neither of them have a quarterback right now. But I don't think J.J. McCarthy is what's going to take the Broncos from being a total mess to being a borderline playoff team. Or it's going to take the Raiders from being a total mess to a borderline playoff team. So I'm starting at 3 picks, 3 first-round picks, 2024, 25, and 26. That's what it's going to take for me. And I'm going to sit there and laugh as they get potentially the wrong quarterback and I get their top 10 picks in the next upcoming season. So let's get to this one from Chris S. Buy or sell. This is a tough one. Trey Pipkins is the starting right tackle in week 1 for the Chargers.
Yeah, this is a really, really hard one just because I don't know if they're going to try to address right tackle in the draft. I mean, it's hard to look at.
If they take a first-round right tackle, then I would 100% sell it.
Yeah.
Right? If they take one in the first round, I don't think there's any chance he starts it. If they're going to take him, they're probably going to use him.
I think I'm right there with you. If they take a tackle in the first round, then he is going to start over Trey Pipkins because this is a guy that gave up 9 sacks last year. You have to look at bringing in more competition. And hey, I wouldn't even be surprised if they give Jamari Sawyer an opportunity at right tackle and see if he can play better than Trey Pipkins did.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it necessarily with Jamari Sawyer. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's what should happen. I think the hard thing is if you want him to really improve and you want him to be your starting guard, and you know where he was at last year from a guard perspective, are you going to split snaps? Are you going to give him half the snaps at each position and think he's going to improve that way? I thought Jamari Sawyer performed admirably at left tackle. I thought he was very good as a rookie.
Yeah.
Moving to the right side makes a difference. And part of the reason, Joe Alt doesn't really do it for me at 5 because I think taking a tackle, which isn't your biggest need. I mean, let's be honest. Trey Pipkins wasn't even the biggest problem on the Chargers offensive line, right? I think both guards had worse seasons than Trey Pipkins did. I think the 9 sacks makes it seem a lot worse than it really was. We've seen him play at a higher level than that, and we haven't really seen that from either of the interior guys at their guard positions. At the same time, I still think they could absolutely take a right tackle in round 1. Unfortunately, Chris isn't giving us that, right? He's not saying, hey, if they draft one in round 1, is Trey Pipkins going to start? He's just asking straight up, is he going to start in week 1? So I think it's so hard to answer this right now. I'm going to say he does start. I'm going to buy it, but I feel really terrible about it. I don't have any conviction.
Ask us again in a few months.
Absolutely. Let's get to this last one here, Andreas Rivera. 5-word answer at most. Buy or sell, J.K. Scott is the Chargers punter next year, or possibly they will look for the draft to get another one.
He's going to be the punter next year. Period.
Over 5 words. Failed. Yeah, if Ryan Ficken wants him, then he's going to stay. There's something to it. Brandon Staley was the one I think that originally was like, hey, hang time, less punt return yards, things like that. J.K. Scott is the perfect guy if that's how you want to play it. If you want to give your coverage team more time to get down the field and pin them back at the expense of the total yardage, right? Because he's never going to be a guy that averages over 50 yards per season. You're trading the total distance for someone who's going to have it hang up there long enough so you can really return, limit the returns. And
he led the NFL in hang time the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, how many punt returns have the Chargers given up for touchdowns over the last couple of seasons with J.K. Scott? 0. So I'm going to trust Ryan Ficken. I think he'll be back. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow because it is your team every day. And I have to give a shout out to my boy Andreas, whose dad watches the show every day. So Papa Dan, thank you for watching. If you guys want to get your shout out on the show, go leave us a 5-star Apple Podcast review and we can definitely work something out. If you already have given us a 5-star review, send us a picture of it and we can get a shout out for you, or just DM one of us. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports on Twitter and David at Dro Talk SD, and we also post the new shows every day to those as well as at Locked On LAC on Twitter. To everyone who hit us up for these buy or sells, you can also hit us up there for the Fan Mail Friday, or call into the voicemail line for your buy or sell or your fan mail question at 323-524-7924. Make sure you guys don't miss the show by subscribing and following for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. And you can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But if there's any news going on, we'll be down here tomorrow breaking it down for you because it is your team every day. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.